we start with these kind of a general challenges of procurement education. We have noticed that the general challenges of education and learning in business in general very much relate to how to illustrate the dynamics and interrelatedness in business operations. Procurement education faces the fundamental challenge of effectively conveying the complexity, interconnectivity, and dynamic nature of procurement within the broader context of supply chain management. Procurement is also integrated with finance and strategy. More specifically, the procurement education challenges are the following. First, how to illustrate systemic interdependencies. This has to do with showing how procurement decisions are influenced by and influence upstream and downstream supply chain activities. It is important to visualize real-time cause and effect relationships, for example, production continuity. The second challenge, how to bridge theory and practice. Students struggle to connect theoretical models, for example, sourcing strategies, with practical applications. Third, how to teach strategic versus operational procurement. An example is how to balance the tactical, for example, purchasing processes, and strategic, for example, supplier relationships management aspects of procurement. Students may overfocus to cost savings and miss broader value creation goals. Fourth, dealing with the data and digitalization. There is an increasing need to integrate procurement analytics and digital platforms into education. Students often lack hands-on experience with procurement software or data-driven decision-making. And finally, fifth, cross-functional competencies. Procurement professionals must collaborate across departments and borders, requiring interpersonal skills that are hard to teach in classroom. When we move to the simulation game, we will illustrate how many of these challenges can be tackled with the business simulation game.
Thank you, Timo. I think what I've really been interested with myself, many of the subjects I teach over the last 25 years, is to increasingly try and map the skills and competencies required by business. I mean, that's what training and teaching is about. And also trying to link it to teaching topics and increasing the method in which I deliver that. So in the past, maybe I would have done a lot more class-based teaching using PowerPoint presentations. But what we started to see is a need to engage students in a different way. And it was just interesting. I was lucky enough to be sitting in Gothenburg in Sweden, a fantastic conference this week. And I sat in on a really interesting paper. And it was about research into the skills and topics that were specifically needed by supply chain employers, including procurement employers, and what those skills, what they needed. And what came out of the discussion was actually, in today's AI-driven world, it's less about just learning about knowledge. Yeah, of course, we need to have understanding and knowledge of concepts, but it's more about developing competencies. Yeah, the competencies that employers want. And of course, there's been many crossovers with my own discussions with practitioners, as I said, whether that's in operations, supply chain, or more specifically procurement. And what we've got here is a list. It's about things like analytical ability. Yeah, can students understand and take large sources of data and not just use tools, but actually have the skill sets to look at data in a meaningful way. Increasingly, and this is really important, and a lot of this will come out again, I think, when we go through that simulation, it's the soft skills. Yeah, that's critical, a critical component. Things like financial acumen, strategic thinking, negotiation skills and ethical judgment, and so on. I'm not going to go through all those. And this is really just a high-level list. I think I'm going to pose a question now. We said we wanted to be interactive. I just want to know, are there other competencies you think are as important or more important that we haven't covered it? As I said, this is a high-level list. So if you want to pop some in the discussion or in the chat, I'll just bring the chat up here. So I want to get you involved as well. So are there any other competencies maybe missing from this list which you feel that should be there? I'll give you at least a couple of seconds to do this. You're like my students who don't respond to me, but hopefully we'll get some interaction here. So are there anything missing? And if there's not, we will move on in a minute. I just want to give a chance for you to think about the kind of soft skills or analytical ability or other skill sets that you think that your students need in order to be successful in today's marketplace and workplace. No? Okay, if there's nothing that comes to mind now, okay, good. Okay, fantastic. If there is things that come to mind as we go through the more importantly, the actual simulation, ask us questions. Well, in what way does, say, RealGame help us to develop students' analytical abilities? In what way could it help us, the students think about strategic thinking? Fantastic. If you can move on to the next slide, Timo, please.
Oops.
Okay, so what I'm trying to do as a teacher is to make sure that my syllabus reflects the key topics within the subject. And of course, I've got listed here, if you go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. A list of topics. I'm not going to go through all of these. I'm just going to illustrate one. So if we take the first one here, procurement strategy, maybe as part of that, we want to emphasize the strategic role of procurement. Yeah, that's fair enough. And how strategic that is within organizations. And we might then want to move on to, say, talking about sourcing strategies and eventually supplier selection. And within that, I would typically then teach things like weighted supply selection and analytical hierarchy process. And I will come back to this later when we actually look at the simulation. But actually, in doing so, it depends upon how I want to introduce these topics. And the method of teaching is really important. And we can develop many of the competencies. So remember the list before. So for instance, the soft skills. So how will I develop the soft skills? Well, in the simulation, we put them into groups of teams working together. They need to therefore work in teams. They need to present their analysis potentially in the form of a presentation. Therefore, the simulation is allowing us to explore those competencies, not just the subject matter. There's plenty of scope to develop their analytical abilities. And again, Team and I will explore that as we go through. Also, financial acumen. Again, there's lots of financial data that we'll show you in the simulation, showing again how you can develop that. And in particular, I think the strategic thinking, having this view of procurement, how it fits into the entire operation and the entire supply chain is a critical part. So what we want to show you today using the business simulation, as I said, this doesn't necessarily just apply to RealGame simulation. This is using business simulations in total, is how to clearly link competencies with topics. Yeah, and we're going to give you one sort of short example of that, or a couple of examples. Okay, I'm going to hand back to Timo, who's now going to show you one of our simulations with a specific focus on procurement. Timo?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Daniel. So let's have a look how RealGame enhances teaching and learning in procurement. So how students learn to balance purchases, inventory management, and production. Some of you have used RealGame, so you know the basic principle. But we start from the basics, and then in the end there might be some new features for you also. But because there are also people who are not familiar with RealGame, we start with the very basics. So RealGame is a clock-operated business simulation game for teaching various disciplines, including procurement. And this is the student's user interface to RealGame. Student teams manage the ERP system of a battery manufacturing company and run its operations from purchasing to customer deliveries. All teams operate in the same supply and customer markets, so they compete against each other. The student team's performance is measured by KPIs such as profit, gross margin, order backlog, average purchase price of the components, inventory turnover, inventory levels of components, and so on. And we will have a look at some of these KPIs in the end of the presentation today.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. I think what's important to link there is from a procurement perspective, you can make sure that the decisions to buy certain products can be linked directly to those KPIs. And we'll come and have a look at that a little bit later.
So now the game clock is on. You can see that the clock time is changing hour by hour as the simulation advances. And we can observe all operations in action. The teacher can start and stop the clock and adjust the clock speed during the gaming session. So the principle is that we start with slow clock speed, And then gradually, when students start understanding the processes, we increase the clock speed. Let's now look into how students assess component suppliers and how purchasing is linked to inventory management and also to the bill of material. So we will start with the production line of the company. So all the basic operations can be found in this menu here, and I will first select production. Here we have the production line of Stormvolt Limited, a battery manufacturing company, and the production line is now operating. Well, I will start the second shift. I want to have 2 shifts running like this. So now we are operating in 2 shifts. The morning shift will start soon at 8 o'clock in the morning. And the bars you can see within the production line illustrate hourly production output from the production process. We can also see the bill of material of the batteries. So we need components called anodes, cathodes, casings, and bolts to manufacture the batteries. And we can also see that based on the height of the bars, we manufacture roughly 24 batteries every hour.
Yeah, and I think what's great to see here is even if you're focusing on the procurement side, which we're going to look at in a short while, you still need to understand the impact that has on the operation itself on production. So we'll come back to that in a little while.
Yep. Then we will have a look at the inventory of the company, which is of course linked to the production process. So in the inventory, we have the end product as well as all components required to manufacture batteries. Teams can observe in real time the changing inventory levels, incoming component deliveries, average purchase prices, inventory capacity, and waste from inventories.
And again, we'll show you afterwards when we talk about the kind of analytics side of it. Behind this kind of platform is rich information that can actually be used to help them analyze and think about their performance.
Yeah. Now, if you look at the inventory, we can see that we are about to run out of anode components here. So we only have 192 in the inventory. And anode is a key component, of course, in the production process, so we need to purchase more anodes. We will have a look at what kind of suppliers we have for the different components, and we have selected the anode here. For all components, the teams have 3 suppliers to choose from. They all differ in price, delivery time, and term of payment. Now we need anodes quickly, and we will now order from the fastest and the most expensive supplier. So this is the fastest. Its delivery time is 2 days and 12 hours. So I will order 2,000 units. And we can see now that in the inventory, 2,000 units have been ordered. Well, of course, now that I purchased these most expensive anodes, it hits hard the average purchase cost of this component, consequently affecting the cost of the end product, but we want to keep the production running. And then keeping in mind the future need of anodes, but also the capacity of the inventory, we'll order also anodes from another supplier while we are at it. So now I will purchase from this one who delivers in 6 days, but the price is clearly cheaper or lower than with the previous one. And in the inventory, I can now see that we have ordered 2 lots of anodes. So we soon will have enough. Now, actually, we ran out of some components. As you can see, the production process is now, the bars are transparent. We ran out of cathodes, and that's why the production stopped here. But this is a demonstration in a way, so we don't have to worry about that. It's more important to give you the principle of how this functions. Let's now go back to inventory. let's assume that we have read some reports and can expect an increase in customer demand. This means that we'll need to start manufacturing 3 shifts. So I will now turn on also the night shift like this, and now we are running the production in 3 shifts, even if we don't have the components, of course. Naturally, we need to adjust our purchasing plan now that the production outcome changes. And it would be great if we could calculate a reorder point for each of the components and be sure not to run out of the components.
I think, Timo, one of the important things is because you've got student teams working in the different functions, is they can work together to plan based upon, say, demand information, think about planning what they need to produce, but obviously that then links from the bill of material to what they need to then procure and buy in. And it's that often that dynamics of a team that's really a powerful learning part of using a simulation that's actually happening in real time.
Yeah. With data from the simulation games information system and reports, we could also calculate the EOQ for different components. And after that, we would be better equipped for efficient procurement and inventory management. Well, this was a very short view on the basic processing, not that successful because we ran out of some components, but I hope the principle became clear to you. So this visualizes the day-to-day operations and decision-making in procurement. So changes and fluctuations in customer demand, the challenge of balancing multiple aspects at the same time, not to speak of the economic aspects, all open up in a concrete and highly effective way.
Brilliant. Thank you, Timo. And I think what we want to do now, is there any questions at this point? Because what Timo's done is introduce the basics. And having used these simulations now for 2 years, the basics doesn't take that long for the students to get their head around. What I'm going to do, if there are no questions, is just to take us through, well, how, for instance, would I bring in a topic like supply selection? And I'm going to look specifically at maybe how you could link your teaching to do supply selection and things like weighted supply selection in practice. So let's have a look at some questions. Is there a way to factor in uncertainties like potential delays? Yes, there is. What we find is you've got, we're going to look at it in a moment, you've got an engine behind it called the session manager. And in that you can, for instance, I do it, my one is put some affect the quality rating of one of the suppliers, and that can then affect a delay in delivery. Is that right, Timo?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. And again, just want to check if you have fluctuating prices from suppliers or static prices. Timo?
This is something that teacher can decide. So the different can easily create different kinds of scenarios with the supply. For example, change the prices and illustrate for different kinds of what's that called? Shocks in the supply chain, and of course also in the market side, the customer market side.
Yeah. So I think what we'll do is, again, are there any more questions at this point? If not, I'll go on and talk a little bit about how we could use weighted supply selection, because then we'll show you the kind of the back engine, the session manager, which you as the professor running the session have control of. We won't spend too much time on that because there's lots of levels of complexity that we could go into. But what we would probably do is keep it fairly generic at this point. And if you're interested, we can always book a demo in order to go into some of the finer details. So what I'm going to just talk us through, and Timo is going to help me do this, he's going to be in charge of moving around the simulation, is to look at this idea of weighted supply selection. So what we can see on the screen here, just for one of the components, the anode, is at the moment we've just got 3 suppliers. And these 3 suppliers, you've only got limited information. You've got unit price, delivery and payment terms. So there's not that much to do, information there to do a kind of weighted supply selection. So what I would do is almost develop a scenario. So we can say, look, the market's changing. There's some new suppliers that are coming into the market. And what we want to do is we want the students to review their current suppliers and how they've performed, and also think about selecting new suppliers. So what you can do as a professor is you can set up certain selection criteria. And you can also give them some guidance about the weighting. So for instance, we're going to open it in a moment. I'm going to ask Timo to show us, but for now, I just want to explain it. Is, for instance, you could look at things like the quality of delivery accuracy. That could be, in other words, you can say that quality is really important. You can weight it maybe 8 out of 10, one of the most important criteria. And we'll show you how you do that in a moment. You can obviously look at things like cost. At the moment here, we've just got the unit cost, but what we'll show you is you can also look at delivery cost as well. So you can make it more complicated. Things like payment terms might be factored in as well. And of course, speed. Yeah, so you can also look at speed. So what you can do is, even just for these three, is set some criteria linked to your key KPIs of the business simulation as a whole. So in other words, remember, we need to deliver on time our end products to our customer, and you can create these scenarios. So a bit like what Helen asked is, you can create shocks, but you can also create scenarios about helping the students then work through and think about, say, weighted supply selection. So what we can start to see here is you can build up the complexity of the simulation as you go through. So you can get them to understand the basics first, but now I want to get a little bit more in terms of doing some supply selection. And I'm going to give them a scenario now just with these existing suppliers. And what we can see here now is we've not only got the basics, we've got things like lot size, we've also got things like delivery costs, and that's important. So you can start to delve a little bit more deeply into the costs associated with delivery. Timo, could you show us about quality? Where would we assess the quality in terms of delivery accuracy? How would we do that?
Yeah, we have a report on our purchases. The thing is that we haven't done that many. So there are two which have, the two which I made in the beginning. These are the moments when I ordered them. This is the promised delivery time by the supplier, and this is the actual arrival time. So of course we could now analyze whether the goods arrived within the delivery time that the supplier promised. And there are variation here between the suppliers. So some of them are more unreliable than the other ones.
Yeah. So again, with a game, a simulation you're running over a period of time, you actually develop a huge amount of data. And later, Timo is going to talk us through business analytics about the functionality of how you could use some of the information. But for now, we can start to see that you can assess the current performance of suppliers, at least against that criteria. And as I said, if you want to make one or two of the suppliers perform particularly badly, we can show you that how you can actually do that as well.
Now we have more suppliers here.
Okay, thank you, Timo. So when we think about this idea of creating complexity, but doing it in stages, I think it's a nice way from a pedagogical perspective, not to overload the students with lots of information, get them used to making purchases. So there you've got more the kind of operational day-to-day side of making a purchase, that purchase order going through, and then them observing the delivery of the purchase and making sure it comes in. You can then add on a layer in terms of doing weighted supply selection by adding new criteria such as delivery cost, things like lot size, and so on. And then the final way you can add complexity is to increase the numbers of supplies, so give them more supply choice. And I think that's really a nice way to deliver it, because what you can do is, as I said, you can do it stage by stage. What's great is that the students have the potential to download rich information about the current suppliers and analyze it. And again, Timo will show you in a moment. You can also create scenarios about selecting new suppliers, so creating that kind of narrative for them. And as what I've found of having worked with RealGame for quite some time now, is they can help you with how you design a session to bring out some of those learning topics. So what is really special, I think, is the students can see the direct and live impact on the rest of the chain of the procurement decision. So we saw quite fortuitously in some ways that batteries stopped being produced. Well, if you don't have delivery on time, if some of your suppliers are letting you down, you can see straight away that you're going to run out of particular inventory, and the students can see that. And again, it might be the fact that they've opted for the cheapest supplier, because they thought that was the most important part. But if the supplier has long lead times and the components are not in the inventory, they will see that knock-on effect in terms of production. And ultimately, and this is really important, they will see the fact that the finished goods can't be delivered to the customer on time. And you'll see from a KPI perspective for doing well as a team, competing against other teams within the simulation, one of the key KPIs is on-time delivery to your end customers. So they can see that whole knock-on effect. I think that's given us hopefully a little feel about how you could use one subject as only one of the topics. Are there any questions at this point? Okay, if there's no questions at this point, again, we'll have some time at the end. We'd like Timo just to finish off by looking about the business analytics. So this is, again, remember linking it back to we talked about competencies. So data analytics, we talked about this idea of strategic thinking. We talked about financial acumen. And Timo's going to show you how you could use some of the information collected in order to explore these competencies.
This is to visualize the different KPIs to students. They can also benchmark their performance to the other student teams. And I will start with very basic KPIs. Of course, we want to also connect how efficiently the students have run their companies to their profitability. So we do, of course, have the basic income statement related KPIs, like revenues of the companies. And I will zoom this a little bit so that you can see better. So we have had 7 companies here. These are the turnovers, their sales. We could have a look at the profit figures. Some of them are doing rather well. Many of them are in the middle. And then also we have 2 companies making loss at the moment. And of course, what they have done, for example, in purchasing, inventory management, and steering the production process affects their profitability.
I think, Timo, what's important here is that there is those interlink between all the functions working together. And I think increasingly those are the type of skill sets that employers are looking for, is that awareness of the different roles of different functions and how they all are interconnected.
Yeah. So then I could move to more supply chain management related KPIs, materials process related KPIs. These are the inventory total values in these 7 companies. So, of course, what you see here is the dots are daily dots. So you can see the day-to-day development of the different KPIs. So in a way, the business intelligence creates a story about what happened within the companies. And of course, these KPIs are also interrelated. So if you perform well in one KPI, you might find the reason from some other KPI. Now, what is a little bit worrying in this session is that you can see that the inventory values are getting higher and higher. So maybe indicating that there could be room for improvement here. Or maybe it's about actually calculating the economic order quantities, which might be surprisingly high. So I don't know actually what is the reason for this. If you don't have the end products for the customer.
I just wanted to make a point there, is that why do we need this information is often the way I run my modules is I would link the teaching, the use of a simulation directly to assignments. So for instance, I ask my students to do either business reports, so they're reporting on how they performed. And actually, if they perform badly, it's fine. Because what you can do is you ask them to reflect on and link to the kind of the theory and the concept. What is it that they've done wrong? What mistakes have they done? And it brings out things like poor supplier selection, things like the impact of not having on-time delivery, and so on. Thank you, Timo.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Then I could have a look at the open orders. So this tells us how much they have had open orders in the end of the day. So in a way indicating have they had enough end products for customer deliveries. And if they haven't had enough components, it is, of course, one of the reasons might be that their purchasing is not doing that well. And I can see that one company has some problems. They are performing well, but this one is, so the order backlog has been rather high occasionally, but then they have been able to solve it, to decrease it. So in a way they have found a solution, but temporarily they have had quite high order backlog, which might have led to decreasing delivery accuracy. This must be the teacher's company, because these companies never in time with the deliveries, but the other ones are doing quite well. So these are probably the student companies.
I think what you see there is,
Then,
can I just say, Timo, is what you get the students to do is to probe into what's causing, for instance, that decline. If you take the group there, I think, which is Stormvault 4, is you're trying to get them through their learning reflections to understand the impact of their decisions. Now, of course, it might not be just procurement decisions, but it might be the fact that they didn't choose the fastest delivery because they were going for low cost. That then has a knock-on effect. There, of course, as Timo mentioned, are multiple reasons, but what you're trying to do is make that direct link between decisions they make and how it impacts the entire operation and process. Thank you, Timo.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Then let's move to more detailed or item-specific KPIs, which relate directly to how efficient they have been in purchasing. So we could have a look at the average purchase prices of the different components. For example, the anode, which we were illustrating in the demonstration. So these are the average purchase prices of anodes in these 7 companies. It is rather a cheap component, but still we can see quite big differences between the companies. So the most efficient one has been company number 7. Compared to company number 5, the difference is actually quite high, relatively very high, very big. Or another one, for example, the cathodes needed in the production process as well. And we can also have a look at the item-specific inventory levels, which reveal us whether they have done the purchases in time. And we can already see that, well, this is the cathode inventory. We can see that, for example, company number 6 has ran out of cathodes very often. So clearly, their purchasing planning has not been working here. But what is actually rather nice is that if I hide all the companies and then just reveal company number 6, well, okay, they have had some problems here in the end. So here was a positive period when they had enough of those, maybe too much of those, but then they faced problems again. So why do they have these problems? That might come from changing demand in the end product, or maybe the inventory was piling up while they were waiting for some other components. So you would have to run through different KPIs to have this kind of an overview or big picture of what's going in the companies. But all the data is here to analyze their performance, their supply chain and procurement performance.
And what's nice is when I get them in my student groups, the assessment, I'm getting them to use raw information. So what's fantastic is you can't AI cheat this. I've just literally marked a load of assignments that have came in on my full-time MBA. And it was wonderful. They use screenshots of their actual performance, and then they link it through to things like, they're looking at, some of them pursued very much a lean kind of operations, and procurement was aligned with that. So they were focusing on low cost. What they realized is by operating in that way, and they reflect on this, they ended up running out of stock. So they get a chance to really explore those kind of trade-offs, maybe between lean and agility. Maybe agility, they decided to have slightly higher levels of stock, maybe order small amounts more regularly. And they can go back and look at the decisions they've made and see what the implications are of this. But they're using information from the simulation, as I said, so they can't really, they can't game it in this case in terms of cheating on their assignments, which I think is really valuable in today's world that we teach in.